Hello, we are the Shark Docs from the Netflix show All the Sharks. We're continuing today with our conservation series for each site that we visited during the competition. And this time we're going to tackle the Galapagos. So hundreds of years after Darwin visited these islands and really changed our fundamental understanding of life on Earth, we're continually learning just how special these islands really are. Not only to birds like these blue-footed boobies here, but tortoises, marine iguanas, and of course also the sharks and the rays. The Galapagos were the last place that we visited for the show. It was the finale. It was a showdown between us and our good friends, the Brits, and for good reason. Whereas other places we visited, like South Africa, have really high shark and ray diversity, the Galapagos has truly unparalleled abundance. In fact, the Galapagos has the highest recorded biomass of reef fish ever recorded, and that largely consists of very, very large sharks. So the Galapagos are 600 miles off the coast of Ecuador, and the Galapagos Marine Reserve is one of the world's most exceptional marine parks and also a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So we had the privilege of diving at both Wolf Island, which is behind Chris up there, and then also Darwin's Arch or Darwin's Pillars behind me. These are two of the most remote and pristine locations in the archipelago, known as the Shark Highway of the Pacific. They also host some of the highest concentrations of hammerhead sharks on the planet, and whale sharks, Galapagos sharks, and countless other marine species thrive in these nutrient-rich waters, which are important not only to Ecuador, but also to the entire eastern tropical Pacific, where fisheries can be intense and sharks and rays face numerous threats.
Today, we're speaking with fellow Shark Docs, Dr. Alex Hearn and Dr. César Peñaherrera-Palma. Alex is a marine ecologist and professor at Universidad San Francisco de Quito, who has spent years studying the movements of marine megafauna like whale sharks and hammerheads in the Galapagos. As president of the MigraMar Research Network, he's spearheading the MigraVia campaign to create one of the world's largest marine protected swimways connecting the Galapagos to Costa Rica's Cocos Island. César is an Ecuadorian marine biologist with a PhD in quantitative marine science, who specializes in using advanced statistical methods to study shark populations and assess conservation effectiveness throughout the eastern tropical Pacific. As academic director at the Pontifical Catholic University of Ecuador, Manabi, and science coordinator with MigraMar, his foundational research on shark abundance in the Galapagos Marine Reserve has become critical for understanding how well marine protected areas actually work. If you want to understand how scientists turn data into conservation action, look no further than the work Alex and César do in Ecuador. So thank you for being with us today, Dr. Alex Hearn and Dr. César Peñaherrera-Palma.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'd just like to point out that behind me in blue is what Darwin's Arch used to look like before it collapsed. And César and I were actually there the last day before it came down. So just to show how Galapagos changes, and those are evolutionary processes and geological processes, but the wildlife that it has, that's what we need to protect.
Man, lucky you guys got to see it. We've learned about it. Obviously, we've heard about it our whole lives, and then we turn up and it's collapsed on us. But thankfully, I don't think any of the animals in the water really seem to mind.
No, it's still amazing down there, and we need to work to keep it that way.
And it's affectionately called Darwin's Pillars now, right? No longer the arches. No, I'm not doing it.
Oh, it's not.
Maybe some of the younger dive guides. I think those of us who have dived there for so many years, we can't bring ourselves to call it anything other than what it was always called. Yeah, it's Darwin's Arch.
Yeah, it was really emotional actually that morning. We left Darwin because it was really pinkish sunrise, and we left around 10 a.m. something like that. And the way that we were actually towards Cocos in this expedition, we got news and said, "Hey, it just collapsed. The Darwin Arch just collapsed." And it was really something that we felt in our hearts. It was something that we were losing there because we were, diving for so many years in that specific place. So we were really sad. Like we were really feeling the moment. And of course, this is evolution. It has to happen eventually, right?
We didn't believe it at first, did we? We thought it was a photoshopped image that someone had sent us.
Yeah, but lucky us that we had the opportunity to work in these places. Lucky us that we had the opportunity actually to be there right in that moment and appreciate it for the last sunrise. And actually, I will say that lucky me for being here, actually, and thank you for hosting this. It's really incredible to have this space to share this story.
Oh, it's great to chat with you all. I mean, this is one of our favorite places on Earth, and I mean, you all mentioned spending so much time there in the Galapagos. We spent 3 days there total, where we were in the water as much as we possibly could be, and that wasn't anywhere near enough. And so that actually brings us to our first question. You know, we checked off a lot of bucket list items in such a short period. You guys have spent years in the Galapagos, so we'd love to hear from each of you about your favorite, not necessarily favorite, that's too difficult a question, but maybe just one or two exceptional moments that you've had underwater with wildlife in the Galapagos Islands. Alex, do you want to get us started?
Oof. How long have you got? I mean, I always try and think my most amazing experience is going to be my next dive, because Galapagos never ceases to surprise us. I mean, after 25 years diving, in August, we swam with orcas. In fact, right behind that photo behind you, Chris. And you know, or falling in and having a tiger shark come past you, or having the schools of hammerheads around. My first whale shark, actually, I was having a nap on the boat because I used to do a lot of night diving. I used to work with lobsters, and the lads woke me up. They said, "There's a whale shark under the boat," and I thought they were, you know, having a laugh. And eventually they dragged me up onto deck in my pajamas, and sure enough, there was a whale shark under the boat. I just grabbed a mask and a little Sony Cybershot camera and jumped in my pajamas, and spent 45 minutes swimming around the boat with this whale shark. I mean, and I could just go on and on. Oh, an experience with an octopus. I was working on a transect, came across an octopus, got into a game of poker. And that was it. That was the end of the transect. I spent 40 minutes playing poker with an octopus. I mean, it's just crazy. Another time I'm doing a transect at 50 meters depth, 45 feet, working away, and suddenly a flightless cormorant appears and grabs an eel from under a ledge and kind of looks at me, and we're both kind of surprised, and off he goes. It's just one thing after another in Galapagos, never ceases to surprise you. And I think that's why we're still there.
So Brendan and I had this insane encounter off of Wolf Island in about 10 feet, 3 meters depth. We were snorkeling in between diving, and I think we had just made the decision to move on and go dive somewhere else to look for more sharks. So we'd actually separated at this point. And out of nowhere, out of these shallow depths, comes this massive tiger shark right up to me and past me. And I'm kind of like, oh my God, like this is insane. But I'm taking pictures really quick because I know how many points the shark is worth in the Galapagos. At the same time, I'm like, after I got my pictures, I went and regrouped with Brendan. The shark had now made its way towards him. And we both were like excited, but at the same time, we're like, okay, I think we got to get out of the water. Like, you know, this thing was clearly looking like it was patrolling the edges. Maybe it was hunting. We had just been with a fur seal and its pup. And we also know there's a lot of birds in the area. So it looked like it was hunting to us. And, you know, I think we at that moment just knew after we got our point that we had to get out of the water. The only way I can really describe the shark is like what Scar looks like in The Lion King. This thing had marks all over it. It was a really cool, insane encounter that we were not expecting.
Wow. Well, I mean, a tiger shark encounter in Galapagos is always very special. My first tiger shark encounter was in Darwin. I was down there trying to tag whale sharks, and this thing, my brain didn't compute because I was in whale shark mode. And so I was and someone actually I've got a photo of me with a harpoon with a tag, and you can see my brain kind of, do I tag it or not? But no one's ever tagged a tiger shark here. It would be the first one, but it's not on my habit, and all these things are going around in my head. And I just kind of followed it, and it went past amazingly. I mean, I think that's the beauty of diving with sharks, right? That you get these close encounters with top predators who put us in our place, and you don't really get that on land. You can't really walk up to a lion in, you know, the Serengeti. You'll get fined or bitten. You shouldn't. I mean, it would be irresponsible, right? But underwater, you can have these close encounters with top predators, and I think there's something primeval about it. It really is special. As to whether they're prey on fur seals, I don't know. We do know that they prey on green turtles because there's a lot of tiger sharks at some of the turtle nesting beaches. We know that they prey on seabirds because sometimes when I've been tagging them, they'll throw up a blue the Peruvian or something. So we know that they do prey on these large animals. They tend to have a fairly wide diet. I mean, tiger sharks have been found with our tires and suitcases in them. So it wouldn't surprise me at all. Sea lions do appear on the beaches with incredibly large bites to them, but large Galapagos sharks will also take a bite out of sea lions. But I wouldn't put it past a tiger shark either. So you're probably right there in some way. What an experience! Not many people get the chance to see a tiger shark in Galapagos. They're there. They may see you. But divers don't tend to see them, not as regularly as you would expect, given the number that are there, because they're there all right. They're just keeping their distance, but they're checking you out.
And look, I'm going to jump in just real brief because we say this about every site, and if someone's watching these videos back to back, they'll be like, "Oh, these guys are full of shit." Like they say this all the time. We mean it, but the Galapagos is above and beyond. Like whereas all these places we visit are exceptional, the Galapagos was the finale for a reason. It feels prehistoric. I've never been to a place that feels more wild.
Yeah. And then talking about wild, I think that if we need to talk about stories, I'm pretty sure that we need a podcast just with Alex about talking one behind another story, behind a story, because we have plenty of stuff. But I really like when I'm teaching or when I'm with students or even with kids, whenever they ask me about this, they say like, well, what are your best moments? It's really, truly hard to define. That I come to the conclusion that there's three types of moments that define my experience in Galapagos. One is breathtaking. The other one is life-threatening. The other one is humbling. So I'll start with the humbling, which is a story that I really like. It's when I started working with Alex, he used to send me to this area where there's nothing else. It's in the south of Galapagos. It's called Bajo 90 Chico. And it was a really rough dive in that side because you don't see the sea mountain until you are right there. No? So we were leaving the site after changing some equipment, and we were trying to get to the boat. We were doing our safety stop. We were in the middle of the ocean with no land on sight, and then suddenly a humble whale, just passed by, saw us, turned around, and start doing our safety stop, with us. So safety stop, when you dive, it's around 3 minutes that you have to remain at 5 meters, right? And I think that we remained like 15 minutes just drifting because the boat actually saw us. We sent our safety buoy and they just, parked right next to us, drift with us. But the humble whale was right below us, watching at us with his huge eye. And you could feel there was somebody that was thinking and analyzing you. What are these guys? Where did they come from? But they were watching, and the whale was watching us, and it was really, really interesting because it turned around very slowly in a very whaley way and look at us, just getting approached a little bit, making some noise that you can feel it with checks. So I think that's one of our most precious, humbling moments.
One of the most, if not the most humbling moments in my life, and I think Brendan would probably agree, was this moment that we had where we saw a bait ball off in the distance and we jumped into Zodiac and went to chase it to see if maybe there are silky sharks or something feeding on it, where, we don't have those points yet. And we come up on it and there are orcas there and we're like, oh my God. Of course, not worth any points for the competition, but we're both like, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to see these in such a remote place like the Galapagos. We look at each other without hesitation. We both jump in with our camera, and the film crew, and we're getting incredible footage of this. There's 2 adult individuals and a juvenile, presumably the adults are females, and they're diving deep into the blue where we can't see them anymore, coming up and just checking us out. They're coming within like feet of our faces even and looking at us, and Brendan and I are like, I've never been so excited in the water, probably with any encounter that I've had. And these things, they stick with us for like, I don't know, like 10, 15 minutes. And we got out a couple of times and got back in just to keep hanging out with them and filming. And I've just never experienced anything like this in my life. And, we were also there in this time of year in July where whale sharks are supposed to be present. That's what we were, they were looking for in Darwin. And we didn't see any whale sharks. on multiple dives. And, we know that orcas are predators of sharks. And so our assumption in that moment was like, oh, well, it's likely these orcas are here, and they're probably, either predating on whale sharks, or as a behavioral response, the whale sharks have left the area because of fear of the predation. So I guess we're curious, to talk to you guys about whether or not you also seen orcas in this area, and if you think our assumption is correct that the whale sharks were being scared off by the orcas.
Well, we must have been there within a few days of each other, because I was also up there last end of July, beginning of August, and I get no whale sharks, and the orcas had been reported about 3 weeks earlier. And then on one morning we were kitted up. We were going to dive by the fur seals on the main part of Darwin, and as we were getting kitted up, the fins came out. Forget that, take off. Let's follow the orcas, and we followed them for about half an hour. We kept right up against the boat and showing their face and everything. There was a large male, a couple of females, and a calf. And there was all this discussion: do we get in? Don't we? And eventually, I'm like, you know what? I'm getting in. So I got in. No one else did. I got in, and the calf came right up to me and eyeballed me, and my heart was just pumping. I'm so glad I got in, but everyone had such an experience. And when we got back to the boat, I know my student Joanna, she just said, I think I'm going to go to my cabin and have a bit of a cry. And I think that just summarizes the again, that close encounter with a top predator.
We had the same experience that we had. They were the same individuals, I'm sure. And the same thing, like Brendan and I, as I said, looked at each other and had to make a decision. Do we get in the water with this top predator or not? And, without hesitation, it's like, yeah, of course we do. This is once in a lifetime.
There's definitely moments that you have to choose whether you jump into the water or not. So now that this has become the Orca podcast, I'm going to throw you another Orca story. There was this time that we were doing some work on Wolf Island, right behind you, Chris. And in the bay, when we anchored that morning, we had to do some hammerhead tagging. So I left in a dinghy with one of our partners, our colleague, and choose the dinghy driver, the boat driver. So we were going, along the bay just to turn around the north of Wolf Island and then come back to the Hammerhead Strike port. And then we saw some orca fins, and there was something going on there, and there was birching on top of it. So, and at first glance, I thought it was that they looked at eating. So when we approached, a little bit was there, and when we were approaching to the area, so I started, looking at this tissue, but there was this wasn't normal tissue. It was like a connective tissue, something that something similar to that. It was like that was clear. And then should I jump on it? Because I didn't have a camera, but I just wanted to see because I was full on, with all my gear, just ready to get into the water. But then I saw these little cute things. And the little cute thing actually was, Alex doesn't believe in me in that area. But I am honestly, with my right hand on the Bible, on my heart, I swear I saw an orca giving birth at that time. And that little baby actually was the one, because it was just floating in the water. And then you saw the orca go around and then touch it with the fin and just carrying it, with the fin. And you can see, and see some a little bit of tinges of red or something, in the white spots. But the white wasn't that strong. It was really pale. And then you could also see, for example, all the fish around actually, from my point of view, that was the placenta they were actually trying to eat. Yeah. So and the orca started, breeding not they, but carrying the baby orca right, on top of the right thing, and just going and swimming along the way slowly. Year by year, after we keep going back to the area, and we keep watching this orca pod going around. I swear that I was the same orca that I saw. Giving birth, the same orca, it was just growing and growing and growing by the years. And that happened for I think it was in 2009. And then when I started actually my PhD field trips, it was in 2013. So I had, luckily, 4 years to, keep watching that little orca just grow and grow and grow.
Wow. Unlocking the inquisitive and skeptical phase of Alex as your Thomas.
Yeah.
And I told the guy, we were calling you lying. There's an orca here in the bay. There's an orca here in the bay. And nobody actually was watching us really because they were all having breakfast. While the people were working. Sorry about that.
Well, I wonder, I mean, I don't know that there's any work that's been done on this, but is it possible that you saw the orca born that then we saw later at Darwin? And honestly, from what you described from the group you saw, Alex, that sounds like the exact same group that we were in the water with, especially if it was the same time, because we had seen, I don't know if they ended up finding this footage or not, but apparently someone got footage of orcas killing a hammerhead actually around there, like the same week. And so we thought, all right, maybe that's the same group. So maybe we're all talking about the same, infamous baby orca.
I think that was at Wolf that they killed the hammerhead. And then they were at Darwin. It's the same group. And we have a colleague that does orca photo identification. She keeps a library. And there's a resident group in Galapagos. So I think those are the ones. But you're right. I mean, they'll go for hammerheads. There's footage of them ripping a tiger shark to pieces like it was a rag doll. I mean, when you think, go back to your dive with your swim with the tiger shark and how you felt being next to a top predator, and then realizing, number two. Number one is the orca. And there aren't many animals that can treat a tiger shark like a rag doll. No, but that's the orca for you.
And we spent time in South Africa, and I went out tagging with Dr. Alison Koch, and we interviewed her for this as well. And the big story there, of course, and that we were there working with our nonprofit Ocean First Institute, was tagging white sharks to see where they're going because they're being predated on by orcas in that area that's changed the entire ecosystem, potentially, trophic cascade bubble. Targeting white sharks, which everybody thinks this is a top predator. Like you said, it's the orca. And it's only a few individuals, that it takes to really change the entire system, not just from the predation directly, but also indirect behavioral changes that will occur. And so that's the big question. And so that fly burn and I were thinking maybe that's why we're not seeing whale sharks. It sounds like maybe you both had the same thought. Yeah.
It doesn't surprise me at all. The whale sharks were gone. I mean, we didn't see any. I think it's the first time that's ever happened. And it's too coincidental. And we know, Sal Jorgensen did a great study of when orcas go, was it at the Farallon Islands off California? It was either Farallon or Año Nuevo. But if orcas go past the islands, the white sharks leave and they're gone for the whole season. Now imagine what is the impact of that on the elephant seal colony and their reproductive success if their predators just vanish because some orcas happen to go through. So it's almost like a random event can really spark this reproductive difference between the reproductive success several trophic levels down. So their mere presence, it wouldn't surprise me at all. So we didn't see any whale sharks, but hey, what an experience. I'll take it.
Throughout this whole trip, there were all these places where we could have seen whale sharks or mantas at some point, and we never did. And I feel like the trade we made was for killer whales at Darwin, which is like, I can never top that. Like literally nothing can ever happen to me that'll top that moment.
Galapagos also has a way of enticing you back. So you never quite get everything. So it means you have to go back.
You want to hear the other ones? It's good. I knew that.
I don't know. I love that. Yeah. Can we get one of each?
Yeah. So life-threatening. We used to go on these whale shark tagging expeditions, and I was doing my hammerhead counting expeditions. So we were with the team, with Alex and everything. And once there was a whale shark passing by, we would approach the shark. I was in charge of taking pictures. And there was these guys as well, Alex, Jonathan Green. They would go and try to tag the shark, so measurements and everything. And when I was taking the picture of the head, so we can do a photo ID, I saw them, they were coming, and they decided, I'm going to have 30 seconds of my life just to go slowly with the whale shark and see, and try to feel and go with him. So I just let myself go. With those 30 seconds, when I turned back, there was nobody behind me. I don't know where the Alex go, actually. I was panicking. And then when I saw my watch, the shark and me, we were at 40 meters. And there was no land, no sea bottom. It was just pitch blue, up and down, left and right. And I said oh my So this is gonna be my life moment. At least I really enjoy it. But then I decided, no, I have to go back, try to go to the same direction that I have. That's really difficult because you don't have point to orientate yourself. It's just blue. And start swimming and swimming and swimming and swimming, trying to slightly go up. And it was around 15 meters. That was just going and said, like, I'm getting nowhere here. So I decided to turn in another direction, and try to go do a zigzag to see if I was able to see the bottom. But right when I was at 5 meters, and it was already like switched for the third time, I saw the tiny tinge of things that were moving, in the distance. And I said, like, that's fish. I gotta be fish. No, it wasn't fish. It was actually a school of hammerhead that were passing by. And because of this comes from knowledge that I actually learned from Alex. They always go back to the arch. So I decided just to chase them with all my heart, saying, okay, this is it. If they reach land, I'm going with them, whenever that happens. So yes, I just follow them until I saw all of my friends, that they were in the bottom, that everything, the arch was right there, the people, divers, the whales, sharks as well in the bottom. And I was watching them, just in right below me. They were looking at me to say, like, where did you go? I was like, I almost died, but they were, doing all hands gestures. It's like, where did you go? And it was like, oh my goodness, almost died. And these guys are just chilling here. Like, nobody was looking for me, by the way. Nobody. But yeah, but my heart pumped really, 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 really fast that day. I thought I was not going to make it. So I was actually happy to be here. And my favorite species, which is my research species, which was my thesis species, actually saved my life that day.
That is an incredible story. I mean, who would have thought we talk about like dolphins and marine mammals always saving people's lives, but the shark saved you in this case, which gives them one more notch in the positive belt. That's insane. And I think, people that don't understand diving, especially in such a remote location like the Galapagos, very remote, really don't understand some of those issues that you can get into very quickly when currents sweep you away. It's something that, I've had a couple of those moments where I'm like, holy crap, like nobody's near me, I'm lost in blue water. And then you find somebody or surf the boats there and you can't even explain like how much that is a relief once that part is over, where you have those moments of like, oh, like, did I just get myself into this? And then you try to think of ways to never get into that situation again if you can.
Yeah, Galapagos is not a place for inexperienced divers, or even divers that are experienced but haven't dived for a while, because it can be very strenuous. You're fighting against currents sometimes. If you get washed off the island, like what happened to Cesar, next stop is, I don't know, Cocos. So it's challenging, but it's very rewarding.
Those currents were no joke in the Galapagos. They were no joke. And Brendan and I are good divers, but we didn't realize how much we were going to have to utilize our skills in some of these locations.
Watch the bubbles when you're watching the episodes. Watch if the bubbles go up from the divers or kind of that way. If they go that way, then they're in a really strong current.
I think it'll be obvious from how much we're clinging to rocks and hiding behind boulders. Yeah. We actually, a couple of the producers hopped in and dove with us at the very end. We'd been traveling for like 2 months together, and Chris and I, and you guys too, obviously, even from how you're telling these stories, love to share this stuff with other people. Like if you're just doing a transect or whatever, it can become like kind of routine for those of us who do this as a career. But as soon as you get somebody who's new to it in the water with you, or like somebody who has never experienced it and you're telling them about it, it brings that excitement back in, And these guys hopped in at Wolf Island and dove with us. And just the currents just swept them away so fast. And we were sitting there ducking behind a boulder laughing to ourselves, like we're working pretty hard out here.
Yeah, there was one short moment I'll share during my PhD. I would dive in a complete blue water in the Gulf of Mexico on a big research boat. And Alex, as we were talking earlier, my background is more fish ecology. Sharks have been a more recent thing for me. I was diving with my now late PhD advisor, Dr. Chris Koenig. He made me promise to never tell this story. I feel like I can allude to it now. He can't fight me on it. But we were bounce diving on a cage. We were collecting grouper on the bottom, and we would bounce dive down to vent them to bring them to the surface. They didn't have extreme aerotrop. And there was one moment, and we're on our own. There's not really anyone watching us. And he started drifting off, and he started like, doing this in the water. And I'm like, oh, he can't make it back to the cage because we're down a line hanging on and we're in current. So I swam over to my longer fins, grabbed him and pulled him back, and we hugged each other underwater because he was in that moment thinking he was going to get swept away. And we were middle of the Gulf of Mexico, blue water, in a boat that can't go more than a couple knots. I don't know what would have happened, but that was one of those moments that I know he had or that I did where it was like, whoa, like that could have turned real fast.
Yeah, they say we keep it exciting. And the current in the Galapagos is really, really strong. And so is that related to why there are so many sharks and rays in those islands? Like, what is it in particular that makes the Galapagos Islands such a hot spot for shark and even some ray abundance? And then also a hope spot, right? Like, what makes it environmentally a place where these animals congregate? And then also in terms of conservation, why has it been identified as critical to the health of the broader oceans globally?
Well, in terms of why it's unique, I guess there is a question of currents there, because Galapagos sits in the confluence of some major ocean currents. And it's influenced essentially by the Panama Bight, which comes from the north, which is warm tropical waters, and then the Humboldt current from the south, which brings cooler waters. And so, and those currents essentially feed a major ocean current, which is the South Equatorial Current, which builds in volume and speed as it heads west. And so you do get, we're essentially an island archipelago in the middle of this. It's a river. I mean, it can go, up it's a couple of knots easily. So that's one reason. And then if you look at where you found the sharks when you were diving around Darwin and Wolf, it's generally around the windward sides of the island. So the currents hit the islands and then they kind of go around them and back again. And there's a sweet spot, and those are where the dive sites are. And if you start moving, the current picks up, and then you'll get whipped around and off you go, right? Whichever way you go, eventually you get whipped around. And the sharks seem to prefer those windward spots, which are also where you get a lot of the reef fish. And I'm sure you saw a lot of that cleaning activity there too. But we don't actually know for sure why they congregate at those particular sites. And it could be a combination of things. One thing is that we've tracked them offshore at night and back again. Presumably they're foraging because they feed on squid, which are nocturnal and come up at night. So it could be that they're using the geomagnetic signal of these volcanic islands to give them roadmaps from a central foraging location. It's also an area where they can carry out social behavior, because hammerhead sharks are particularly social. And then maybe at those islands, at that sweet spot, they've got their spa, right, with the cleaning fish and everything, but also there might be something to do there with their metabolism. I mean, if they're resting during the day in that sweet spot that they just tend to circle around, perhaps that's an energy saving environment that allows them to focus on digestion. But we're really still learning about the reasons why they're there. And in terms of why it's such a hope spot, again, the fact that in a relatively small area we've got those major ocean currents does mean that you can be swimming with penguins and corals and hammerhead sharks in the same dive. I mean, so we get this incredible diversity of species from all over the world. And there's high degrees of endemism because the islands are sitting surrounded by conditions that are very different. And then also they're very remote. They were only discovered in 1535, and they haven't really, the human footprint wasn't really until, I guess, the whalers, and even the whalers didn't leave that much.
Yeah, the footprint on land. Someone's going to pick me up on that. They did, because they introduced goats and pigs, which are very invasive. But what I mean is that there wasn't much human activity in the Galapagos until quite recently, so that it's far enough away that it's been less impacted by coastal areas, and also it's this oceanic hotspot. It's incredibly productive as well, because from the west you have a deeper current that comes. When it hits the Galapagos Island, you get upwelling and a lot of productivity, and that basically is the basis of the food chain. And so, yes, we get the sharks and the penguins and the cormorants and the albatrosses. We also get a lot of tuna, and so the big fishery industries tend to be around the islands too. It was kind of a mixture of concepts. And then I guess to wrap it up, it's where we learned our place on this planet, right? Through Charles Darwin and his theory of mechanism of natural selection to explain evolution. I mean, so it holds a special place in our psyche as well.
There you go, guys. You have a masterclass of Galapagos with Dr. Hen. And I have to say that he's one of the persons that I would definitely look for if I ever want to know something about sharks in Galapagos. And just to add a little bit there in about why they are doing. So we have these questions with Alex all this time. He has done an amazing research trying to assess that. And in the last, I would say like 5 years, we've been doing a lot of effort trying to model the aggregation hotspots for these species. And we are right now about to reach the breakthrough about what is the dynamics that actually are governing these sites. So in the oceans, there's one parameter called edikinetic energy, and it's actually a parameter that measures the vorticity of the ocean. So how much energy goes into the water whenever the water is creating these vortices. Is that right? And it happens, as Alex was saying, that they prefer diets with high current, and they prefer diets actually with high eddy kinetics. And we are doing this because Darwin and Wolf is a beautiful place. Those are oceanic islands, and not the only areas where these species actually aggregates. We have also seamounts, and Alex is working in an amazing seamount, which is a thing that's 60 miles north from Darwin, which is called Panama. It's still unprotected, unfortunately, but this area hosts a really high aggregation of hammerheads as well. And it seems that this location, this species actually is looking for this area with high current, but also with high dissolved oxygen amount. So this is something that actually we just submitted this week as well to be reviewed by scientists. It's a new publication that we just prepare basically, specifically trying to understand what are those drivers that we haven't actually understand so far. And this is something thanks to Alex and all the people who's working there, that we were able to collect the specifically oceanographic parameters right at the moment that we were measuring the abundance of these species, not just sharks, but many other species that are on these sites.
So the Galapagos, it sounds like, are very unique, but also they're not alone, right? There are lots of other places in the Eastern Tropical Pacific that have these similar energetic environments and have the upwelling and lots of nutrients and oxygen concentrating. And so Cocos comes to mind, and Malpelo and some of these other places, Revillagigedo. And so can you all just describe the connectivity between all these different important habitats amidst the landscape of fisheries threat posed to these animals, and maybe touch on some of the features that unite all of these really special places, and also how you're using the science of connectivity to further conservation in a place where it's pretty difficult because there are all these different countries and different fleets operating at the same time. I know that's a lot, but yeah, a very interesting topic to us.
Well, Cesar led the study to justify the swimway, so I'll defer to him to start for this one.
Thanks, Alex. This question goes straight to my heart because we've been working so hard for actually showing the world that Darwin and Wolf are not isolated and Cocos is not isolated, but actually they have this structural and functional connectivity between them that actually is allowing many species to move back and forth. And in the words that I really like to use, for me, all these area that has this change of underwater mountain, which is called the Cocos Ridge, that connects Darwin and Wolf all the way to Costa Rica and including I really like to call it the Serengeti of the oceans, because you definitely have a place where there is a highway where the conditions are actually changing, the species are moving around just to find the sweet spot, the habitat preference, where that place they really like to stay, to rest, to aggregate, but also to escape. And the study that we've been carrying out in the last 20 years actually shows that this species is moving based on, one is reproductive cue. And I know that Alex throw me the question, put the question back to me, but I'm gonna let him to talk a little bit on what's happening with the sharks that he has tagged so far about how they move. But because they have really interesting data from just recently. But the thing is that this reproductive cube that is making the big mama fishes move around, and in especially Darwin and Wolf Darwin, we have this study over there that shows actually almost 80% of the sharks that we were watching there are actually big mamas, so are females that are aggregating with that are higher with the maturity size. They are bigger, sorry, than the maturity size. So they mean that Darwin and Wolf is actually used with this part of the population, which is very critical. And whenever they are feeding, because they need, there's a really nice article that shows or was describing how females, they go offshore first by males because they can reach these high energy feeding grounds, and then they can grow bigger and faster, so they can actually fulfill the role, reproductive role. So in these areas, they're moving from one of these keys, and they're using these seamounts, Paramount, they're using the other seamount, West Cocos, which is west to Cocos Island. They're using those as a reference in the navigations whenever they are going to feed, whenever they are going to breathe, whenever they are going back to the resting area. So it's very interesting. There's a lot of seamounts that are actually haven't been discovered so far, that we believe that all of these are actually part of the Cocos Ridge. They are serving the purpose as a stepping stone, this really interesting highway that it's not only being used by hammerheads, but many other species that are coming and going from Cocos, from Costa Rica to Galapagos, or from Galapagos back to Costa Rica, or to the rest of the Central Pacific.
Do either of you want to speak on some of the other specific species? I mean, we saw when we were in Darwin and Wolf, the lesser golden cow-nose rays, and then we saw lots of scalloped hammerhead. I mean, that was really attraction for divers for us. Black-tip silky sharks, spotted eagle rays. So I wonder if they're all maybe kind of using that corridor in a similar way, or if it's, and I love that you call them big mamas too. That was when to use that from now on when I talk about big pregnant females. So yeah, or Cesar or Alex, if either of you want to comment on some of those species, and maybe if they're using them similarly or differently in the same sort of way.
Yeah, I think one of the first things we learned with tagging and tracking these animals is that there's a lot of variation among individuals, right? And you could, I've got a case right now at Paramount, at the seamount that it's an unprotected shallow seamount. The tip is about 250 meters from the surface, and it's just outside the new reserve that was created to link Galapagos to Costa Rica. And we're tracking about 10 hammerhead sharks at the moment. About half of them are male, half of them are female. The males haven't moved. They're sitting at Paramount. It's almost like they've anchored there and they're waving their tag up like, dude, I'm not going anywhere. And they've been sitting there for 6 months, and they've moved about 20 miles radius. They're just circling around Paramount. The females have gone all the way to Panama City, right the way to Panama City, spent a couple of days around there, and then have come back. So they, a round trip of maybe, almost 2,000 miles, or 1,500, 2,000 mile round trip. Now, that is incredible. So even within a species, and then you find that for example, silky sharks, we've been tracking those for several years, and you can have some individuals, in fact mostly females, silky sharks, but you have some individuals that hang around Darwin for 7 years, and then you have another individual that made it all the way to Clipperton, which is a reef atoll, a coral atoll that's 1,500 miles away from here, and then back again. And so what drives one individual to move and to use that energy, because that's a long way to go and come back again. What drives that, and why don't the others? So for a start, there's a lot of variability, but even within that variability, you can say certain things about certain species. And I think what we found so far is blue sharks and silky sharks tend to just move around the area, and some are resident and some aren't. Whale sharks have quite a clear migratory route, and it's mostly very large females, and they use that swimway not so much. They're more focused on an area called the equatorial front, where you get two currents sliding past each other. And when they slide past each other, you get these tropical instability waves. So if you imagine a bowl of soup and you stir it with a spoon, all the particles go to the middle, right? And if you're a plankton feeder, like the whale sharks are, you want to be in the middle where the particles are. And so they track those tropical instability waves out into the Pacific and then back again and end up on the coasts of Ecuador and Peru. Tiger sharks tend to be more resident, but occasionally will move between Galapagos and Cocos. Black tip sharks and Galapagos sharks tend to be less migratory and stick by the island. So it really depends on the species. But I have to say, it's not just sharks. We've got green turtles that are endangered, and they nest in the beaches in Galapagos, but they feed, or they used to feed, in Cocos. Cocos now have had a recovery of tiger sharks, and I think the green turtles have figured out it's probably not a very safe place for them to be. So maybe they're going elsewhere, but we have had that connectivity. And also the critically endangered East Pacific leatherback, which is literally down to a handful of individuals. After nesting on the beaches of Costa Rica, they migrate along that Cocos Ridge, past Cocos Island, past Galapagos, and eventually out in the Pacific to their foraging grounds. So it's a multi-taxonomic corridor, but it's not that every animal of every species is using it. It's a little more nuanced than that.
That was an incredible answer. Exactly what I was hoping, for sort of a rich discussion of that, because, when you talk about marine reserves and protecting animal, that area more than others is very complex, and talking about management and protection of animals, I think it's a good example for it. These animals are highly migratory. They're moving around. Some have higher site fidelity, but that matters for management, right? If one leaves one jurisdiction and another, they don't know the difference and they get caught there, but they're protected here. It means a lot for the management, especially of endangered species.
I love that you guys are studying how the environment structures and dictates where these animals are going and spending time. And so you're uncovering information not only about the species themselves, but there are aspects to your work of oceanography as well as animal ecology and dive behavior. And it's, people always think like, oh, you put a tag on a shark and that's like what shark researchers do, but there's so much going on. And as you're uncovering how the environment structures the behavioral decisions of these animals and where they go, I'd imagine the environment is also structuring where the fishing fleets are going too, right? And so I'm curious, Chris just mentioned connectivity again. We keep hitting on that between all these places. These animals are moving between protected areas and unprotected areas where there's still lots of intense fishing. These things overlap, right? The animals go to places where there's lots of prey, and whatever the reasons are that bring them to one place, the fishing fleets are there too. So what have you guys discovered about that spatial and temporal overlap in this region where tuna fleets in particular, are pretty intense?
Yeah, and that actually goes back to your previous question about how difficult or how easy it is to kind of think about these transboundary species. The nice thing about the Cocos Galapagos swimway, in theory, is that it is entirely encapsulated in waters that either belong to Ecuador or Costa Rica. There's no international waters there. So it essentially boils down to two countries making a decision. Now, if we think about it, at the moment, we've just finished the Ocean Decade Conference in France, and one of the big one of the big challenges is for countries to ratify something called BBNJ, which is an international agreement that would allow us to create marine protected areas in the high seas that don't actually belong to anyone. That's an incredible challenge, even to get it ratified. And as we speak, I checked this morning, there were 50 out of the 60 countries, so it's still a way to get it ratified. And even once it's ratified, are we going to be able to come to agreements with all these different actors to create this? So we thought this is low-hanging fruit. This is a bilateral agreement between Ecuador and Costa Rica. So what actually happened? Both countries agreed independently that the protection around Cocos and protection around Galapagos was not sufficient for many different reasons, including climate change, including perhaps encroachment from fisheries, and including the fact that we've stopped looking inwards. When we started working in Galapagos, when the Galapagos Marine Reserve was created, it was all about protecting endemic animals that are only found there. And local fishing was about coastal animals. And it wasn't until really we started looking at sharks and turtles and albatross that we said, well, hang on a minute, what's the role of Galapagos for the protection of these highly migratory species in the region, right? So we started to look into that more formally in about 2020, just when the pandemic started. There was a big movement in Galapagos to call for extended protection. And Cesar and I were both part of this study to like bring together all the science. And can we create scenarios? Like what would increased protection look like? And we used all the information. Local fishermen were concerned that fish aggregation devices were being swept through. The government was concerned about climate change. There was concern about ocean plastics. We just brought all the information together, and then we just built scenarios like, so if you want to solve A, B, C, and D, this is what you might end up looking like. If you don't want to do that bit, well, fine, but then you're not going to do this bit. You're not going to solve this bit. So it was all about providing scenarios, which is a much better way, I think, than trying to be prescriptive, because at the end of the day, these decisions are political. And our job as scientists was to provide the scientific advice and the scenarios to everyone, whether they wanted to hear it or not. And there were a lot of very difficult discussions. Obviously, the conservation movement in Galapagos was really keen to get the information. Some of the other actors didn't really want anything to be touched. But at the end of the day, Ecuador came to a consensus between all actors and created a new marine reserve called Hermandad, which means sisterhood or brotherhood. And I think it's the only, I hope someone will prove me wrong now, but as far as I know, it's the only open ocean marine reserve that has been created in consensus with the industrial fishing sector. So that shows a fair degree of responsibility from our fishing sector. And it's 60,000 square kilometers. Half of that is completely no take, and the other half is no long lining. And long lining is the fishing gear that most affects the species that we're concerned about. And in the end, what it looks like is Ecuador's half of the swimway, because essentially the priority was to protect that migratory route from Galapagos to Cocos. And of course, Ecuador can't do anything in Costa Rican waters, but we can protect all the way to the border. Then it's up to Costa Rica to take that and extend to Cocos. And what Costa Rica did was a similar exercise. They ended up expanding Cocos National Park. And then they did something which was a little tricky. They created something which they called the Bicentennial Management Area, which extends from Cocos National Park all the way to the border. So if you look at a map, you think, well, that's fantastic. A shark is now protected in Galapagos, Hermandad, Bicentennial, and Cocos. Game over, we're done. Unfortunately, the Bicentennial Management Area doesn't have any management. So at the moment, it's a paper park, and we've been trying to put a little bit of pressure on Costa Rica as friendly neighbors to say, look, we're doing our bit. We're protecting the animals halfway. Can you please ensure that they then get to Cocos safely from your end? So once Hermandad was created in January 2022, it was declared. Within a year, we had a management plan that was designed with all the stakeholders, including the industry. The following year, so 2024, we did our participatory baseline expedition. So we went out there to figure out, okay, what have we got? Because we need to start measuring our success into the future. So we now have a monitoring plan, a baseline study, a research plan. But the most important thing is Ecuador signed the world's biggest debt swap for nature, thanks to Hermandad. And so a group of philanthropic organizations, over $1 billion, I can't remember the number now. You'll have to look this up. But over $1 billion of Ecuador's debt was written off in exchange for and repackaged, and that came along with a fund that will provide all the resources needed for enforcement of Galapagos and Hermandad in perpetuity. As well as that, another fund of several $1 million per year that goes into sustainable livelihoods in the ocean in Galapagos. And funding has just been announced last month to support various organizations in Galapagos to work on environmental awareness and also fisheries and sustainable fisheries. So, I mean, by creating a marine reserve, we've now got funds to improve the livelihoods of people in Galapagos. So it comes full circle. That is a real success story, because yes, one of the big criticisms of any marine reserve is how do you enforce it? Well, there you have it. In this case, it's amazing. I think all of us are really, really proud to be part of this. This is a true example for the rest of the world.
And I don't think I understood the depths of that. And I think that, that could be a game changer for how the rest of the world, approaches marine protected areas, and especially these large expanses. So that is an incredible story. I can't wait to hear how that continues to unfold in the future.
We were talking a little there about sustainable fisheries, and I know there's a big effort in the Galapagos, a big push towards mixed use of Galapagos waters, not only for tourism, understanding that an individual shark in the Galapagos can be worth over $300,000 over the course of its lifetime, right? Like 1 in 3 people to the Galapagos is there specifically to be underwater. And that's even with like all the land tortoises and all this amazing stuff on land and the history. But simultaneously, people live there, people fish. I think there's a preconceived notion that anyone who's a marine scientist is anti-fishing, and that's not the case. Chris and I, at least, are very pro-sustainable fishing, and I know there's a huge effort for that in the Galapagos. So could you just tell us a little more about how that's going, and if there are any exciting initiatives that you've seen in recent years?
Well, that's a really interesting question. There's I think one of the most exciting news in Galapagos at the moment is that they ratified that the Longline is banned completely, and there was something that was going on for a few years. There was a battle between the fishermen in Galapagos with the government, stating that they needed more opportunities and access to other resources. And the thing with the long lines, they will give them access to tuna fishing, for example, is that it is so general that it doesn't have, you just hang by using a hook, decide whether you want just to specifically catch tuna in that way, in the way that the long line works. So the government ratified that, luckily, in a few months ago, and that I believe right now it's like more less than an issue for species like hammerhead that are so sensitive. But there's also not just that. I think that by this experience and everything that we have gained through Hermandad, we have also, I believe there's also a good news over there, because the whole fishing sector, the industrial fishing sector, they acknowledge the importance of the Galapagos, and they actually were the ones, as Alex said, who supported the creation of Hermandad. So, and by doing that, you show that we are more in a mature system, that the fishermen actually be responsible for the resources. Funny enough is that while in Ecuador we created this specific area without long lining on it, and banning, protecting completely the area, or at least half of it, from fishing. In the other side of the border, and this is a topic that we've been talking right now in the UNOC this week, is that Costa Rica actually did a different approach. They banned totally poor seniors, and then allow a long line to be used within the bicentennial marine reserve. And that's a very hot topic. I know that Alex, I can see Alex's face right now, and it's very difficult, but actually it's an issue that we're
They
facing right
banned
now.
pursaners because they don't have any pursaners. So it's quite easy to ban something that you don't have. I'm sorry to say. It's like saying, let's protect giraffes in Galapagos too.
It was a very cheeky move, I have to say. So yes, and it shows a little bit of the Costa Rica, for example. He was doing an amazing job by expanding Galapagos Island, and by including also the seamounts that are very important for hammerheads that are around that. So let's put in context that it's like one country does a really good thing, but then it's lacking another part of it. So this big puzzle that we're trying to assemble for the protection of the species like hammerhead, it's still halfway through, because Ecuador, we did great with Hermandad, but there's some bits and pieces where the area should be a little bit bigger, or it should have included the paramount seamount, which is really important for hammerhead as well, and it's right at the border, but it wasn't included as well. So it's like something that we still owe to nature, do our best actually to get that part protected, because it's a very interesting, the important area for the movement of hammerhead whenever they are arriving to Galapagos through the swimway. The artisanal fishermen from Galapagos are really really working as well right now to create the more sustainable and it's actually really interesting and very important sustainable fisheries actually happen in the world. They are working to accepting the no more lining is happening. We still have some pressure that comes from the artisanal fishermen that actually, or fishermen that live in the coast of Costa Rica, of Colombia, Panama, and Ecuador. So I think that the next frontier to reduce the susceptibility or at least the decline of hammerheads that are actually being fished by longlining is to work with the coastal communities, and that's a new frontier that we are right now discussing as well here at UNOC, that we need to, if we want to succeed in protecting our oceanic islands, oceanic ecosystems, we have to definitely improve the livelihood of the people who is actually going to fish there, because they are I would say, the main stakeholder. There's industrial fishing, except industrial fishing in terms of poor seniors, they are not targeting or have hammerheads as bycatchers. No, they are interested in that species actually, and it is reduced amount of hammerheads that we get there. Not that it's good, by the way. It's bad, it's still bad, but long lining in the other side, and long lining that comes from artisanal fleets or semi-industrial fleets that come from Ecuador and other parts of the region. This is a threat for the species. So Galapagos, yes, artisanal fishing, it's working quite well with issues, but yet anyway, it's working to protect the species. And the other species in Galapagos, industrial fishing is doing their bit, and they accepted Hermandad, but then yes, artisanal fisheries from mainland Ecuador, they are still an issue that we have to deal with. It's not, as you said, sustainable fisheries, yes, we just can't tell them stop fishing from now, because it will create economic collapse all around the coastal areas. People need to fish because it's an economic activity.
I've been focused on the silky shark, working with IATTC, the Tuna Commission for the Eastern Tropical Pacific. And something that I didn't realize, I think it's very easy for folks generally to look at the industrial fleets way offshore as like really being the culprit behind population declines of lots of these animals that even spend a portion of their life in the open ocean. And something that I've come to learn is actually, and I think the scientific community also in like the last 10 years or so has really started to learn, is that the small scale fleets are not necessarily so small scale. A recent study came out that showed that the majority of shark mortality is actually in coastal zones. A lot of the species in the Galapagos even give birth in shallow nursery areas. And so you've got something like a scalloped hammerhead where these adorable little pups are growing up in mangrove habitats along the coast where they're very susceptible to fishing.
It's an interesting point you make. I was just having a conversation earlier this week about an exhibition, and one of the panels was about responsible fishing. And it was a series of photos of different fisher folk, but they were all artisanal. And I kind of said, well, again, you're feeding into that narrative, right? The industrial big bad wolf, artisanal, the downtrodden communities, and they're environmentally friendly. So maybe we can take it a step back. What does responsible fishing actually mean? And there are ways of knowing it. I mean, there are certification processes that do this. So do you fish in terms of ensuring the continuation of a healthy population of the target stock? Do you fish ensuring that you're not damaging any habitat? Do you fish ensuring that you're not damaging the community? And do you fish in a manner that's equitable to your community, to your own human community? And I think if you start asking those questions, you can step back from whether you're industrial or semi-industrial or artisanal, because you're right, people's minds have images. The artisanal triggers an image that's not necessarily the real one. I'd also like to say Galapagos doesn't have a very good history of good fisheries management, and we do tend to look outwards and think about the Chinese fleet and the mainland fleet and industrial fleets, but in reality, since the creation of the Marine Reserve, I was a fisheries biologist there for many years, I don't have a single example of successful fisheries management, not one. We collapsed the sea cucumber. Lobsters ain't doing great. The scorpion fish right now is not doing so good. The bacalao ain't doing good. So, and the problem is that we have an overcapitalized fishing sector, because when it was created, it was all about the sea cucumber that brought in millions of dollars, and then they overexploited it. It collapsed. and where am I going to get my millions of dollars from? And so there's a push. I think right now in Galapagos, there's two visions, right? The vision of, well, let's find new markets and new resources to fill the gap. And that's basically following the old paradigm where you have a local resource for a global market. And I think that's just doomed to collapse. And what we're trying to do, or some of us are trying to do, is turn that on its head and saying, well, instead of asking what Galapagos can do for me, why don't I ask what I can do for Galapagos? And so, for example, if there are tourists, 300,000 tourists each year coming to Galapagos, and if you go to restaurants in town, there's salmon on the menu. So think about the carbon footprint. We're importing salmon and we're exporting tuna. Oh, hang on a minute. Why aren't we creating more associations between restaurants and tour vessels and fishermen? And can we do that in a way that's also responsible? So there's one fisherman that I work with a lot. He uses something called a shell catch camera. It's a camera on his boat that records everything he does. When he gets back into port, that gets beamed up to a team of certified fishery observers. And so they can give him a seal of traceability. So when you buy a fish from this guy, in fact, you can scan the QR code and watch the fish come out of the water. So you know that it's been caught in a responsible fashion. And he always says to me, but I want to be sustainable. I said, well, actually, that's not your job. Your job is to comply and be responsible. The sustainability part comes from the authorities and the scientists who should be doing the stock assessments. And again, fisheries monitoring in Galapagos still needs strengthening. So I think there's a lot of work in Galapagos. But my point is, Galapagos has a lot of needs that the fishermen can provide. We don't need to be looking outside Galapagos to satisfy those those imbalances between the sector and the resource.
I'm gonna get on how Alex responds right there, and they don't have to go outside. And the good stuff about what Alex do and what I do is that we complement our work in a very nice way. So I'm working mostly right now in Costa Rica, Ecuador, and he does the excellent work in Galapagos. So by assessing the fishing sector over there right now, I'm showing, proving how they have gotten from fishing right there in the coast, right in the 80s, all the way to the 2010 decade, to be fished right next to Galapagos, right next to Alex Door. And this is the issue that we have in mainland Ecuador, not collapsed, but our resources have declined consistently and significantly, from when they started fishing in the 1980s. And sometimes the valuation is around 50% of what they catching right now is what they used to catch in the 80s. Sometimes it's just 25%. But if you compare to the growth of the fishing effort and their catches, they actually were doing really well in the 90s and the 2000s. In the 2000s, they were catching like 2, 3, 4 times, sometimes 10 times what they were catching in the 80s. But right now, they're catching less than they were catching in the 80s. And of course, like 50% from what they're catching in the 80s, and around 100, 120% less from what they were catching in the previous decade. So the dynamics in Costa Rica, Ecuador, because of the poor management, I would say that is an example of poor management. I'm sorry. That has drove all the fishermen to collapse some of their resources in Costa Rica, Ecuador, and they by that have to switch either fishing gears or even activity. And when they do the switching from fishing gears, actually they're going straight to Longline, because still sharks, somewhere around in the Pacific, because we're lucky about that. So they want the shark king to fish them, get into shore, and then get some money for them, or whatever other non-legal reason as well. So that's an issue that we have at the moment. And Galapagos does have a lot of issues. They still have this stuff to fish in it right there next door. Sorry, right in the door.
I could talk to you guys about this forever. It's like, this is my sweet spot of research interests. And I think it sounds like for you guys it is too. I mean, it's awesome to study the animals. And I know, Chris, we want to get back to a couple of the animal specific questions, but there are lots of folks who get into the science of marine biology or studying sharks because they're really truly fascinated by the creatures themselves, or had some moment with one as a kid or something. And in my case at least, I'm interested in these problems, and it's just that these problems happen to face sharks in a big way. They're often not the right species to fish, and yet we fish them too heavily in a lot of cases. And so this is where I think like people who are really into problem solving and conservation, like this is where the rubber meets the road, right? Is for sharks and rays, fishing's the number one threat. And you guys are in a place where just all of this bubbles to the surface so much, given the complexity of the situation and the needs for sustainable fishing and livelihoods, along with protecting these gems of places left on our planet.
If you think about, what can people do to help? And in many places around the world, you can be a responsible consumer. You can insist that the fish that you're buying has been caught in either responsible or sustainable or both ways, and there are several different ways to mechanism to certify that. I mean, there's and I remember when I lived in California, there was a traffic light system when you went to the supermarket, and the red wasn't very sustainable. The green is kind of the one you want to go for. Now, in Galapagos, we don't have that, and there are fishermen that are using these mechanisms to show that they're traceable and get their stamp. What I would like is, if you're visiting Galapagos, ask in the restaurants, how was that fish caught? And at the moment, the answer is going to be, we don't know. It was caught locally. But if enough people ask, we can start building pressure for the restaurants and the boat owners to buy traceable seafood, and that will support the fishermen that actually trying to make a difference. Because at the moment, a lot of the tuna that people eat in the restaurants is caught illegally by longlines, and there's no one asks. So if you ask, you can help make the change. So I would say that's the biggest thing. And also, when you do go to Galapagos, don't order salmon. Order something that's caught locally.
Yeah, I think the last thing anyone wants when they're visiting the Galapagos as an ecotourist who's excited to spend time underwater with wildlife is to be a part of the problem, Like the amount of money that everyone people save their whole lives for a trip to Darwin and Wolf. So yeah, I think that's fantastic advice. People are always asking us, what can I do? And that's such a difficult question. And I think so many people aren't living their lives in proximity to the ocean or really connected to the ocean except through seafood that they order. And it's so easy to remove yourself from that food chain. But to think of yourself as part of it and to choose what you're eating and how it's being caught, I think is very powerful.
I believe that not many people have the chance actually to dive in Galapagos. But if any of the viewers want to dive in Galapagos, I will also suggest that, join the effort to be a scientist, as a citizen scientist. And Alex has devoted his time and all these years actually to create these app hubs where you can actually see how the sharks, or count not just hammerheads, but just everything that is right run. And by doing so, you definitely help us actually right there.
Un pequeño grupo de científicos y guardaparques ha iniciado un programa de monitoreo de tiburones desde el año 2006. La data recabada con esta información ha brindado datos de la abundancia relativa y estacionalidad de estas especies, pero principalmente de los tiburones como el tiburón martillo y el tiburón ballena.
But monitoring has been limited in scope to these two species and to the waters surrounding the islands of Darwin and Wolf, and data collection only occurs once or twice a year. To better understand and protect the Galapagos Marine Reserve, we need to capture larger numbers of observations from dive sites throughout the archipelago. With your help and Shark Count Galapagos, a free app for smartphones and tablets, we can do just that.
Shark Count Galapagos is a user-friendly tool that allows divers visiting the Galapagos Islands to help monitor marine life in the Galapagos Marine Reserve. With Shark Count, divers become citizen scientists and make important contributions to our understanding of Galapagos marine ecosystems by recording the number of sharks, sea turtles, rays, and ocean sunfish they encounter during their dives.
With your help, Shark Count Galapagos can collect thousands of valuable observations that otherwise would not be available to scientists and managers in the Marine Reserve.
Then, if we have like 10 years of data or 5 years data, we can actually see the different response of the population for any single change in the framework that we do in the management framework. So that will help us a lot, and yes, sorry for the advertising here, but it's really important because sometimes it's really difficult for us to be there, and you guys can be a scientist like me and Alex, or even better than me, because I'm just a small fish in the ocean. But yes, definitely that's something that you could do to help us, apart from request a responsible fish.
So we really do appreciate you guys spending time with us and sharing your perspective and all the lessons you've learned over the years and experiences you've had in such a magical place. If anyone's interested in learning more about the research of either of these two scientists, please check out their Instagram pages at Galapagos Shark and at Cr Peñaherrera, and read their publications. Read their publications on the Google Scholar page that we'll place below the video. We also suggest you look into MigraMar yourself. Amazing organization with a lot of really important work going on in the Eastern and Tropical Pacific. So we'll provide links to those and other related organizations below the video, along with references to the studies mentioned throughout this whole conversation, which has been rich with science. So you can read it straight from the source. So thank you guys so much. And yeah, that's it for us. So this is the last one for the Shark Docs. Thanks, everybody.
And thank you so much to the viewer. Thank you for joining us. It's your curiosity that brought you here to learn a little bit more about shark and ray conservation from some of the places that we visited and all the sharks around the world, and to visit with some of the scientists that are doing the work, living in these regions and doing this actual work on sharks and rays. Hopefully this brings you hope and good understanding of some of the conservation happening around the world.
People are working tirelessly throughout their entire lives to protect our oceans and the people and wildlife that rely on them. Those people include many of the folks on this show, all the sharks, from the producers who pitched a new way to see sharks on TV to the other competitors who capture the beauty of these animals on camera day in and day out. So we're really grateful to play a small part in the story, and we're especially grateful to you for joining us. So until next time, we hope to see you on the water. Thanks.
Ciao.